I keep thinking that we will reach a point of peak disbelief or peak madness or incomprehensibility. But every time when I think surely it can't get any crazier, it does. The situation finds there's another turn in the road, and a whole new vista of bonkers opens up before us. And alongside my continuing process of awakening and realisation of the problems, plural, is that there are still so many people of a different perspective who don't seem to think there's any sort of problem, and that they think that the anxiety of people like me is a symptom of some sort of madness. But those of us on my side, on our side of the divide, I suppose, we ask constantly, why won't the other people see, or even just contemplate the possibility that all is not well? As we become more and more aware and concerned and anxious, the continuing calm of those around us, it's like being in a nightmare, where you're trying to warn people from the other side of soundproof glass that they're in terrible danger, and you can't attract their attention. And I would say that what has to be contemplated is that lies have been built on lies for years. I don't know how long it's been going on. And in fact, to misquote the old Carl Sagan anecdote, it's not turtles all the way down, but lies. And if not downright lies, ever increasing levels of economy with the actuality, as some other politician once put it. There's more and more evidence, I would say, credible fact-based evidence every day about, say, harms to life and health by medical products, harms to life and health by the food that so many people are encouraged to consume. There's all of the broad spectrum damage to life, health, liberty, rights, the economy, children's education, not to mention children's mental and physical well-being. A long list of detriment resultant from the lockdown that people are tired of hearing about, that has never been addressed properly. All of the building information about excess deaths, a fully laden passenger load of death every day in Britain, but no inquiries, no explanations. Every day there's more about the unseemly nature of the war in Ukraine, more to challenge the official narrative on climate. And admittedly, I think our metaphorical or mental inboxes are filled up at a rate faster than anyone might keep up with. There's always new stuff coming in. You get to the point where you think, I'm not going to read any of it. We look at American politics and find what's happening on the other side of the Atlantic increasingly unsettling and troubling. The unchecked arrival of migrants across the southern border of the USA, and the relentless pursuit of ex-President Donald Trump in hopes, in Democrat hopes of putting him in jail once and for all. You look at America and there's just this seeming spiral of destabilising madness. It's incomprehensible. Elsewhere in North America, already discussed a standing ovation for a Nazi in the Canadian Parliament. And then, almost as soon as it happened, a blatant attempt to memory hole what happened, an attempt to have any account of the event stricken from the record, which is textbook Orwell 1984. On and on until we just don't know where to look. I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone in thinking and saying that this phenomenon, and it is a phenomenon, is due to the scale, the lying, which has hidden the truth from us. is just too big for many people, maybe even most people. And that includes, and I think actually, ironically, it includes educated, successful professional people. And so many are just disinclined, unwilling to look squarely at reality, because to do so, it involves accepting you were had. And it's an extremely uncomfortable process, admitting to yourself that you overlooked or were in some way oblivious to so much for so long. I'm still going through, on a daily basis, a process that feels like grieving for what might be described as the death of the world I used to live in and take for granted. And I was thinking about, because always on this, in these podcasts and whatever, we always try to look back and see if there's anything instructive in the past. And I've been reminded continuously about an apocryphal story, and it is an apocryphal story, about what happened when the ships of the Europeans arrived in the New World. And there's variations on the details. Sometimes, depending on what you hear or read, it's supposed to have happened when Christopher Columbus arrived off the coast of, well, what would be the West Indies. And it's said that at first the peoples, the indigenous population, just ignored the ships. Big vessels, far bigger than anything that the locals had or were using, and yet the story goes that they just ignored them. And ostensibly, it's supposed to be that the ships were so large, so technologically advanced, so foreign to any experience on the part of the native people, that they couldn't perceive. They could not take in what was happening, what was right before their eyes. In terms of the apocryphal story, you're expected to believe it was almost as though the ships were invisible, and the big vessels with their huge billowing sails were just ignored until the little landing boats, the long boats, were rowed ashore, and then the white men stepped onto the shore, and then they were confronted by warriors with weapons and whatnot, because by being in these smaller boats and then being visible as men, they had become something that the locals could comprehend and deal with. Other times you'll read about it as though it happened to Captain Cook, not Columbus, and that happened off the coast of Australia. But the same story unfolds, and it probably all comes from a diary entry made by the botanist Joseph Banks, who travelled alongside Captain Cook on the Endeavour, and he wrote up what happened when the Europeans had their sort of first contact, so to speak, with the locals in Botany Bay. There's a quote from the diary: "These people seemed to be totally engaged in what they were about. The ship passed within a quarter of a mile of them, and yet they scarce lifted their eyes from their employment. At one, we came to an anchor abreast of a small village consisting of about 6 or 8 houses. Soon after this, an old woman followed by 3 children came out of the wood. She often looked at the ship, but expressed neither surprise nor concern. Soon after this, she lighted a fire, and the 4 canoes came in from fishing. The people landed, hauled up their boats, and began to dress their dinner, to all appearance totally unmoved at us, though we were within little more than half a mile of them." Right, so that's the account, and you can see how you could, interpret that, misinterpret that even, and the vessel is 106 feet long, and seemed to his astonishment to not be having any impact. So, at best, really, the story is fuel for a metaphor, and teaching something about assumptions and about different points of view, born of different lives and different priorities. And you might say that the indigenous people, wherever this happened, they saw the ships, but because they were preoccupied with more immediate concerns of life, their own stuff going on, that they could see the ships out there, but they didn't engage with it until the sailors came ashore, when they were challenged, because at that point they had become a potential threat to life. And I've also been thinking in terms of why so many people aren't seeing what I'm convinced I'm seeing. There's a famous experiment. It's called something like the invisible gorilla. It's a video, and what you've got are people in two different uniforms bouncing a basketball up and down, and they're in a locked off shot in the frame, and there's people in like red tops and people in white tops, and the basketball's being passed back and forth and randomly between like about a dozen people, and the person watching the film is told, keep track of how many times someone in a white top catches the ball, right? And in the middle of the video, a man in a gorilla suit walks from like right to left across the frame, but most people watching and counting don't see the gorilla because they're so focused on counting the ball getting passed, and it's only when they're shown it again. You know, they do the thing and they go 14 times or whatever, and then the person watching them says, did you see anything funny about what was going on? And they go, no, nothing. And then, you didn't see the gorilla? And they go, what? And when they're showing the film again, it's obvious. I mean, the person just walks through, sort of mingling it. The gorilla walks through the shot, and people are aghast. But it's because they had a focus, they had a task. And it's amazing what people won't see. Not because they're stupid, not because of any kind of willful blindness. They're just focused on something else. And so I would say there's an application for all of that. The Columbus / Captain Cook story about the ships and the invisible gorilla that must be playing in, I would say, to explaining why some people are refusing to acknowledge threat. And perhaps in the final analysis, it's because for those people the threat hasn't come close enough to their own lives. You know, maybe they do to some extent know that there's danger, but they're not yet calculating it as being dangerous to them, which is often, I think, a symptom of people living in a herd. You think, oh well, there's plenty of us, the chances are, you know, one of the other cows will get eaten first, you know, that kind of thing. And that they'll continue to be okay, and that they might as well just get on with what they've always done and thinking what they've always thought. There's also gaslighting of the people by the government, of the peoples of the world by the governments of the world, or the governments of the West in particular. And gaslight is a term we've all sort of become familiar with over the last few years, and it's usually, and I think it was like first applied to abusive relationships. And it's about emotional abuse in large part, where someone is persuaded by a nasty partner to doubt their own sanity, or to doubt their own perception of events and the world. And it comes from a play that was first performed in 1938 called Gaslight by Patrick Hamilton, and it's the story of a baddie called Jack who convinces his wife Bella that she's going nuts, and he's, amongst other things, he sneaks out of the house, comes back into it secretly, and turns down the gas lights, because it's set in the past. It's set, you know, when people's homes were lit with gaslight, so he turns them down, but then when he comes home, she'll say, the lights dimmed again, and he'll say, no, they haven't. They're just the way they always were, and that's the origin. It's part of it. He's trying to make her think she's gone mad so that he can get her section somewhere and inherit her wealth or whatever, you know, get the house to himself. And it's all based around causing her to doubt and have no faith in the reality that she sees with her own eyes. And gaslighting is an officially defined form of abuse, but it's definitely something that the authorities are doing to us now. We are being, and have for the last, well, certainly through lockdown and through COVID, people didn't know which way was up. Masks on, masks off, lockdown, gatherings of 6, gatherings of 30, take your tests, don't take your tests, too many people are taking the tests, you know, go out and eat, go to the restaurants, oh no, there's now, people are spreading it because they're mixing. What? We were told to go and eat. Yeah, it doesn't matter. And so again and again and again, the government moved to make the people to blame. The people were always to blame. If it was whatever was going wrong, it was the people that were at fault. And you saw the same thing when Trudeau, Justin Trudeau in Canada, in the aftermath of standing up and clapping for the Nazi, his statement in the aftermath was that all Canadians, it was a shameful day for all Canadians. You know, inviting them to think that it was their fault, that they were somehow complicit in what had happened. And then he spun it to make it sound as if it was all a product of Russian misinformation. Hillary Clinton's at it again right now. She's out there now saying that another election is going to be stolen or interfered with by Russian misinformation. Now, that allegation about Russian misinformation affecting the election was her invention. It was proven that she was the instigator of that myth that the Russians had interfered with that election. But now she's saying they're going to do it again. Well, but you did it. And Ursula von der Leyen in the EU said, in fact, it was a speech she gave in North America, but Ursula von der Leyen, who's the president of the EU Commission, she gave a speech where she said the Russians might go nuclear again. And in the shadow of Hiroshima, this is heinous. And you go, that was the Americans. What are you inviting the audience to infer from what you're saying? Are you trying to trick them into thinking, gaslight them into thinking that the Russians bombed Japan with atomic nuclear weapons in World War II? So all of that's going on. The scale of what is going on is so big, too big for so many people. They just can't look at it because the implications for their sense of self, you know, for their understanding that they are clever people, that they know what's what, all of it has to be challenged before you can come to terms. But what I absolutely think is that the longer the delay in coming to terms with the deceit, enormous as it already is, the harder the process will be. All this effort right now to take control of the internet, to take control of social media, you know, the online space, is an indicator, and you might take some heart from this, of how alarmed the authorities evidently are, and how desperately it explains the desperation underlying how they're behaving. You know, there's an online safety bill going through in the UK. It has gone through. It's waiting a royal assent. Similar moves are afoot in the EU, also in Australia. It's become essential for the authorities not just to silence dissent, but simply to stop people finding and sharing information that runs counter to the official narratives. You know what it looks like? It's like a big game of whack-a-mole. You know, and information online is the moles that must be whacked. And even when they're whacked, more moles keep popping up. It's all about how terrifyingly big the lying has been and how much bigger it's getting at ever-increasing speed. And I suppose it's like an addiction. The longer you've been indulging your habit, whatever it is, the longer you've been imbibing lies, the greater the tolerance you've built up for the lies, the harder it's going to be to break the habit. But I would say the choice is stark. You face the pain of withdrawal sooner or later, or in the end, you die of the drug.